What's going on YouTube? It's your boy DMD, and today guys I am coming at you with my post Extreme Force updated hero deck profile. So I haven't brought you guys a profile of this in a minute, but with the release of Isolde, the Two Tails of the Noble Knights, it's really a lot better to play. I just took this to locals a couple days ago, and while it wasn't the most competitive because DarkLaw is not the best with Spiral kind of out of the format, it's still a solid, fun deck to play, and there still are a lot of new innovations and tricks that I'm trying out with the new Link monster, Isolde, of course. So without further ado, guys, let's get into the profile, and I will show you the changes that I made. So starting off, of course, we've got our triple copies of Elemental Hero Shadow Mist. This is really self-explanatory. It helps us get into DarkLaw. Then, of course, for our rank 4s, we've got 3 copies of Bubbleman. I thought about cutting this down to 2, but I just couldn't do it because when I can pull off the Toad play, it's so good, and it is worth it to set in, go into Toad, and then set a couple of back row. It's just really powerful. So, of course, we've got to play 3 copies of our Bubbleman. Then we are playing 3 copies of Vision Hero Vion. I was only playing 2 copies of this last time, but now that I'm playing Poly in this build, I feel that it's really necessary to max out on Vion, just because he's so helpful in extending our combo plays. Also, he's pivotal in making Isolde because he can send the next guy here, Destiny Hero Malicious, to the graveyard, so Malicious can banish himself and summon another copy of himself from the deck. So that rounds up the hero monsters. So without further ado, let's get on to the supporting engine. So for the supporting engine, we've got 2 copies of Goblinberg. This just helps us get into Isolde and also to make rank 4 plays, which is really important. So then, of course, we have the superior version of Goblinberg. We have 10 Goldfish. Now 10 Goldfish is pivotal because it helps us get into our Toad plays and also helps us make Miss Starboy, although we tend to use Goblinberg a little bit more now because Isolde is out. So what I may end up doing is cutting 1 copy of 10 Goldfish and exchanging it for another Goblinberg. I think that's probably the way that it's going to go after this, but for now, I've settled on 2 Goblinberg and 3 10 Goldfish. So that wraps it up for the monsters. Moving on to the spells now. We of course have triple copies of A Hero Lives. Helps us get out our Shadow Mist and go into DarkLaw. Then we've got triple copies of our Searcher, which is E-Call. If I open up multiple E-Calls, it typically means that I'm going to be in a really good position because that means I can just set my spells and traps and then just go into Bubbleman. So it's really good to see as many E-Call as possible. Then of course we've got triple copies of Mash Change. Mash Change of course is helpful to go into our DarkLaw. So we of course want to max out on our Mash Changes. Or maybe you don't. I've seen builds that only run 2 Mash Change, and I guess that makes sense too, because being that you have 3 Hero Lives and so many ways to get to Mash Change throughout the deck, it wouldn't hurt you to only run 2 copies of Mash Change. So if you wanted to cut one of the Mash Changes for something else like a Polymerization, that would, suffice, I'm sure. Speaking of Polymerization, we are running only 1 copy of Polymerization, simply because I feel like you don't need to max out your copies of Poly. You just need that 1, just because it's not something that you want to do often, but if you set up Isolde really early on, you have room for more fusion plays alongside your DarkLaw. So then we've also got 1 copy of Rhoda, just to basically search out anything from the deck. It's basically a better version of E-Call because everything in the deck is pretty much a warrior. On to the traps, and let me just say right now, this is a fairly big trap lineup. Just because you want to set up DarkLaw and or Toad and just stun them out with back row. We've got triple copies of Anti-Spell Fragrance, just for basically anything, because Anti-Spell shuts off a lot of stuff. It can backfire against you if you're not careful, so do be careful with Anti-Spell, but as soon as you establish your board, basically it allows you to just kind of win. Then of course, triple copies of D-Barrier. Going first, setting up a D-Barrier and a DarkLaw, plus maybe a couple more back row, is really powerful. And if you manage to establish a totally awesome, which is not the hardest thing in the world to do, you basically have a toad and a dimensional barrier, which guarantees you the win. And then finally, to wrap up the traps, we have 2 copies of Solemn Strike, because it's good to stop our opponent from doing pretty much anything. All right, so moving on to the extra deck. We have, guys, the reason this deck is even playable at this point, we have Isolde, 2 Tails of the Noble Knights. This Link monster is super duper good. It's an on-summon searcher. Basically, it'll search your Bubble Man or whatever you need out of deck. It's any warrior, basically. So if you needed to, you could search your Honest Neos. But the thing is, though, you cannot normal or special summon the monster that you add for the remainder of the turn. So searching Honest Neos, which I do run in the side deck just to beat over Masterpiece, is really solid as well. I'm also running 1 copy of Miss Starboy just in case I have 2 waters on board or in hand, so that's also really important. And the 1 copy of Proxy Dragon just to extend our Link plays. And that's pretty much it for the links. Now on to the fusions. We, of course, have 3 reasons that you play the deck. DarkLaw, 3 copies of DarkLaw. If you establish DarkLaw going first against a deck like Spirals, even though Spirals isn't really in the format anymore, like this was like an auto win against Spirals, especially back in Machine Dupe format where they would just summon Quick Fix and then Machine Dupe for the win. That was just kind of an auto win card against them. So, you know, it's a really solid card. DarkLaw is DarkLaw. They can't search without getting something from their hand banished. So, you know, it's just really, really powerful to establish DarkLaw going first. Then to continue on with our fusions, we've got Ab-Zero. Ab-Zero is really powerful because when he's mash changed or just destroyed, he's a board wipe. And then Acid, which is an on-summon Harpy's Feather Duster. Then this is the card that I need to change. I'm running 1 copy of Sea Monster of Theseus. This needs to be a rare fish because rare fish is level 4. On to the rank 4s. We've got 1 Baguska. Whoops. We've got 1 Baguska. Baguska is just good to establish if you have the ability to make Baguska. This deck is okay with Baguska. I don't go into it that often because I would just rather worry about DarkLaw. So, you know, establishing Isolde plus DarkLaw is basically this deck's main strategy, unless you can make Toad, which I'll get to in a minute. Then we've got 1 Tornado Dragon. I like making this a lot alongside DarkLaw in cases that I'm going up against decks like Paleozoics, because basically DarkLaw turns Tornado Dragon into a walking Cosmic Cyclone, which is really, really powerful against the Paleozoic traps. Then we got 1 Castel, just to blow stuff back into the deck. We've got 1 Honor Arc. The thing I like about Honor Arc is that he's a water, so what you can do if you have Poly, you can absorb something with Honor Arc, then fuse for Ab-Zero using the Honor Arc. So it's a really cool little play that I like to do. And of course, we have 1 copy of Bahamut Shark. And finally, we've got the best dude in the extra deck. No, I'm just kidding. But it's one of the best dudes in the extra deck. We've got 1 copy of Totally Awesome, just because negating stuff is really good. But if you like this video, please be sure to like and subscribe if you have not already. I love this deck. It's a lot of fun to play, and if you feel like playing it, it's not the most expensive deck right now that you could build, and it's pretty good. So, you know, if you wanted to pick it up, there are some changes that I would make maybe moving forward in the next format, but it's not bad. Anyway, guys, let me know what you think about my profile in the comment section below. It's me, it's that DMD, and your boy is out.